In the simple kitchen of a farmhouse, farmer John Miller catches Mary, the widowed housekeeper, eating scraps of food fallen on the floor, never imagining that this moment of pain would hide a secret capable of changing everything. Now get this. John Miller had been working that land for near about 30 years and he thought he'd seen it all. But that Tuesday afternoon, when he walked into his own kitchen, what he saw made his blood run cold. There she was, Mary, his housekeeper, down on her knees on that old wooden floor, picking up scraps of food that had fallen from the stove. And I mean, she wasn't just picking them up to throw away. No, she was eating them, right there on the floor like, Lord have mercy. John froze in the doorway, his work boots still muddy from the fields. His heart started pounding hard in his chest. The woman had her back to him, her thin shoulders hunched over, her hands trembling as she gathered bits of bread and vegetables that had dropped during meal prep. Mary? His voice came out rough, almost a whisper. She jumped like a scared rabbit, scrambling to her feet so fast she nearly fell. Her face went pale as a ghost and her eyes, oh my God, those eyes were filled with such shame it could have broken a stone heart. Mr. Miller, I was just... The words tumbled out all broken and desperate. John looked around that kitchen. The pantry was full, the icebox had plenty, the stove had a pot of stew cooking, enough to feed half the county. And here was this woman, this hard-working soul who'd been keeping his house for months now, eating scraps off the floor like she had nothing. His mind was racing. How long had this been going on? How many times had she gone hungry while he sat at that very table, belly full, not noticing a thing? Mary, He started to speak, but the words caught in his throat. She backed away from him, her calloused hands twisting her apron into knots. Please, Mr. Miller, I needed to... My boy, he's... That's when John saw it, really saw it. The way her dress hung loose on her frame, the dark circles under her eyes, the way she was standing there, proud, even in her humiliation, trying so hard not to cry. And right then, everything he thought he knew about his own household came crashing down around him. What was he going to do now? Before John could say another word, he heard the click-clack of high heels on the hardwood floor behind him. His whole body tensed up. He knew that sound. Evelyn. John, darling, what on earth is taking so... His fiancée stopped dead in her tracks when she saw Mary standing there, trembling like a leaf in the wind. Evelyn's perfectly painted lips curled into something that wasn't quite a smile, more like a sneer. She was dressed to the nines as always, city clothes that cost more than Mary probably made in 6 months. Her diamond ring caught the afternoon light streaming through the kitchen window. Well, Evelyn said, her voice dripping with disgust. What do we have here? Mary's eyes dropped to the floor. Ma'am, I was just what? Evelyn stepped closer, her perfume filling the small kitchen like a cloud, eating off the floor like some kind of animal. The word hit Mary like a slap. John saw her flinch, saw the way her whole body seemed to shrink. Evelyn, that's enough, John said, but his voice didn't sound as strong as he wanted it to. Enough? Evelyn spun around to face him, her eyes flashing. John, this is exactly what I've been telling you. This woman is beneath us. Look at her. She's embarrassing. She's making your household look like a charity case. Mary's hands were shaking so bad now, she had to grip her apron just to keep them still. A single tear rolled down her cheek, but she didn't make a sound, not one sound. I want her gone, Evelyn announced, loud enough for anyone in the house to hear. Right now, today. Pack your things, Mary, or whatever your name is. You're fired. You can't, John started, but Evelyn cut him off. Can't I? We're getting married in 3 months, John. This will be my house too, and I will not have someone like her working here. The whole town will talk. Mary finally looked up, and the pain in her eyes was something awful to see. Please, Mom, I need this job. My boy, he needs... I don't care about your problems, Evelyn said coldly. That's not my concern. The silence that followed was heavier than storm clouds before a tornado. Mary stood there, pride and desperation fighting a war on her face. How much more could this woman take before she broke? That night, Mary walked the 2 miles back to her little place on the edge of town. Her feet ached something awful, but she barely noticed anymore. Pain had become her constant companion, as familiar as her own shadow. The house, if you could even call it that, was more like a shack. The wooden porch was cracked and crooked, boards missing in places where she couldn't afford to fix them. The paint had peeled off years ago, leaving bare wood that turned grey under the sun and rain. She pushed open the door, and it creaked loud enough to wake the dead. Inside, her boy, Tommy, 7 years old with his daddy's eyes, was sitting at their little table doing homework by the light of an old oil lamp. They couldn't afford much electricity. "Mama!" He jumped up, all smiles. That boy could light up a room brighter than any lamp ever could. "Hey there, sweetheart," Mary said, forcing herself to smile, even though her heart was breaking into a million pieces. She'd been fired. Again. How was she going to tell him? Her eyes drifted to the crooked photo on the wall. Her late husband, Daniel, in his work clothes. That gentle smile of his frozen in time. He'd been gone 3 years now. Accident at the mill. 1 minute he was there. The next, gone. Just like that. Left her with nothing but a pile of medical bills and a boy to raise. "Mama, you okay?" Tommy asked, his little face scrunched up with worry. Kids always know, they just know. "I'm fine, honey, just tired is all." She ran her fingers through his hair, soft as silk. "You do your homework?" "Yes, ma'am. Teacher says I'm real smart." "That's 'cause you are, baby. You're gonna be something special one day, you hear me?" She looked around their tiny home. One room serving as kitchen, living room, and her bedroom. Tommy slept on a little cot in the corner. The roof leaked when it rained. The stove only worked half the time, but it was theirs, paid for with every ounce of strength she had left. Mary sank into the rickety chair, exhaustion weighing her down like chains. No job, no money coming in. The rent was due in a week. Tommy needed new shoes, his toes were poking through the old ones. How in the world was she going to make it? How was she supposed to raise this beautiful boy in a world so unfair, so cruel, so determined to keep her down? "Lord," she prayed silently, "just show me the way." Now here's the thing. John didn't fire Mary that day. Something in him couldn't do it. Maybe it was the way she'd looked at him, or maybe it was his mama's voice in his head, telling him to do what's right. So Mary stayed on, walking on eggshells every single day. But Evelyn, oh, she wasn't done. Not by a long shot. 3 days later, Evelyn showed up at the farmhouse with 4 of her fancy friends from town. You should have seen them, all dressed up like they were going to some big city event, not visiting a farm. Their laughter filled the house before they even walked through the door. Mary was in the kitchen, scrubbing the floor on her hands and knees. Her dress was old and patched, her hands red and raw from the harsh soap. "Oh my goodness!" One of Evelyn's friends, a woman named Barbara, put her hand to her chest, like she'd seen something shocking. Is that your help?" Evelyn smiled that cruel smile of hers. "That's Mary, our charity case." The women gathered around, staring down at Mary like she was some kind of strange animal at a fair. Mary kept scrubbing, her face burning hot with shame, but she didn't look up, wouldn't give them the satisfaction. "Does she always dress like that?" another woman whispered, but loud enough for everyone to hear. "Poor thing looks like she's wearing rags." "That's because she is," Evelyn said, her voice sharp as glass. "I heard she lives in some falling down shack on the edge of town. Can you imagine?" The laughter started then, high and bright and cruel, echoing off the farmhouse walls like mockingbirds. "Evelyn, you're too kind, letting someone like that work here," Barbara said. "I wouldn't have the patience." Mary's hands stopped scrubbing for just a second, her jaw clenched tight, but she didn't say a word, not one single word. She just kept working, kept breathing, kept holding on to whatever dignity she had left. John was standing in the doorway. He'd heard everything, every cruel word, every heartless laugh. His hands were balled into fists at his sides, and something was building up inside him, anger, shame, something he couldn't quite name. But he stood there, just stood there, silent as a stone. The question hanging in the air was bigger than that farmhouse, heavier than anything. How long would he keep letting this happen? John couldn't sleep that night. He kept seeing Mary's face, the way she'd held herself together while Evelyn and those women tore her apart with their words. Most people would have fought back, would have said something, anything. But Mary, she just kept her head down and her dignity intact. The next morning, John found himself watching her, really watching her for the first time. She arrived before sunrise, like always, walking those 2 miles in the dark. Through the kitchen window, he saw her stop at the gate and kneel down. At first he thought maybe she'd dropped something, but then he realized she was praying, right there in the cold morning air, asking the Lord for strength to face another day. Something twisted in John's chest. Later that morning, he saw her with Tommy. The boy had walked to the farm to bring his mama some lunch. Nothing but a piece of bread and an apple, probably all they had. But you should have seen the way Mary's face lit up when she saw him. She hugged that child like he was made of gold, kissed his forehead, straightened his worn-out shirt. "You study hard today, you hear me?" she told him, her voice full of love. Education's gonna be your way out, baby." "Yes, Mama." Tommy hugged her tight, then ran off toward the schoolhouse down the road. John watched Mary stand there, watching her boy until he disappeared from sight. The look on her face, pure love mixed with worry so deep it could have drowned a person. That afternoon, something else happened. John had left some money on the kitchen table. $20 he'd meant to put in his wallet. He forgot all about it. When he came back hours later, there was Mary, holding out those bills. "Mr. Miller, sir, you left this. I didn't want you to think..." "Think what?" he asked. That I took it." Her voice was steady, but her hands trembled slightly. John stared at that money, then at Mary. She could have taken it. Lord knows she needed it more than he did. Her boy needed shoes. Her house was falling apart. She was eating scraps off the floor, for crying out loud. But here she was, honest as the day is long, returning what wasn't hers. "Mary," he started, but she was already turning away, heading back to her work. John stood there, $20 in his hand, feeling like the biggest fool in the county. What kind of woman was this? And what kind of woman was Evelyn, really? His heart was stirring, shifting, waking up to something he'd been too blind to see. But the real question burning in his gut was this: did he have the courage to do what was right? Margaret Miller had lived 72 years on this earth, and in all that time she'd learned one thing for sure. You can tell everything about a person by how they treat folks who can't do nothing for them. She'd been watching. Oh yes, she'd been watching everything. Margaret had seen how Evelyn treated Mary, like dirt under her fancy shoes. And she'd seen how Mary carried herself, head high, even when her heart was breaking. That kind of strength don't come from nowhere. It's forged in fire, tested by hardship and tempered by faith. One afternoon, Margaret found Mary in the back pantry, crying silent tears while she sorted through the vegetables. The older woman's heart just about broke in two. "Child," Margaret said softly, and Mary jumped, quickly wiping her eyes. "Mrs. Miller, I'm sorry, I was just..." "Hush now." Margaret came closer, her weathered hand reaching out to touch Mary's shoulder. "You got nothing to apologize for. Nothing at all." Mary's lip trembled. "I'm trying so hard, ma'am. I'm trying to do right, to be strong for my boy, but I'm just so tired of being treated like I'm worth nothing. Listen to me, and you listen good." Margaret's voice was firm but kind. "Worth ain't measured by the size of your bank account or the fancy clothes you wear. It's measured by the content of your character. And honey, you got more character in your little finger than some folks have in their whole body." "But Miss Evelyn," she says. "I don't care what that woman says." Margaret's eyes flashed. "My son might be too blind to see it right now, but you're the kind of woman who holds a home together, the kind who prays when times get hard, who loves fierce and honest, who works till her hands bleed and never complains." Mary looked up, hope and disbelief fighting on her face. "You keep your chin up, you hear me? The Lord sees what you're going through, and so do I." From that day on, Margaret made it her mission to help Mary however she could. Extra food accidentally left out. A few extra dollars slipped into Mary's apron pocket. Small acts of kindness that said, "You matter, you're worthy, you're seen." But the question burning in Margaret's heart was growing stronger each day. How long before she confronted that cruel woman who was gonna marry her son? And when she did, Lord have mercy, what would happen then? Henry Thompson had worked John's farm for near about 40 years. His hands were rough as tree bark, his back bent from decades of labor, but his heart, that heart, was pure gold. He'd been watching the whole mess unfold, and it didn't sit right with him. Not one bit. It was a Thursday afternoon when things came to a head. Evelyn had stopped by again with two of her friends, and they'd cornered Mary near the barn, making fun of her worn-out shoes. "Do those even have soles anymore?" one of them asked, laughing. Mary stood there, silent as always, her face burning with shame. That's when Henry walked up, his work boots heavy on the ground. "Miss Evelyn," he said, his voice calm but firm, "I believe Mrs. Miller needs Mary in the kitchen." Evelyn turned to him, her eyes cold. "Excuse me, I don't recall asking for your opinion, Henry." "No, ma'am, you didn't, but I'm giving it anyway." He looked straight at her, no fear in his eyes. "This woman here works harder than anyone I've ever known. She deserves respect, not mockery. You could have heard a pin drop. How dare you?" Evelyn started, but Henry wasn't done. "I've lived a long time, Miss Evelyn, long enough to know that money and fancy dresses don't make a person worth anything. It's how you treat folks when nobody's watching that shows who you really are." Evelyn's face turned red as a beet. "John will hear about this." "I suspect he will," Henry said calmly. Then he turned to Mary. Come on, Miss Mary. Let me walk you back to the house. Mary's eyes were wide with shock, but she nodded and followed him. As they walked away, Henry said quietly, "Don't you let them break you. You hear? The Lord sees everything, and He don't measure worth the way they do." That night, Henry found John in the barn. "Boss, we need to talk." "Henry, if this is about what happened today, it is, and I'm going to say what needs saying." Henry looked John dead in the eye. "That woman you're planning to marry? She's cruel. And that woman working in your kitchen? She's got more honor in her little finger than Evelyn's got in her whole body." John's jaw tightened. "It's complicated." "No, sir, it ain't. It's simple. You just gotta have the courage to do what's right." The question hung there in the barn, heavy as the hay bales. Would Henry's courage finally wake up something in John? Would it give him the strength to stand up for what was right? That night, Mary sat on the edge of her bed, exhausted to her bones. Tommy was already asleep on his cot, his soft breathing the only sound in their tiny home. She'd been looking for an old sweater to patch when her hand touched something unexpected, a folded piece of paper tucked deep in the bottom of her trunk. Her heart skipped a beat. She knew that handwriting, Daniel's handwriting. With trembling fingers, she unfolded the letter. The paper was yellowed, the ink faded, but the words, oh, those words were as clear as day. "My dearest Mary, my warrior, my love, if you're reading this, then I'm gone. And I'm so sorry, sweetheart. Sorry I couldn't stay longer, couldn't provide more, couldn't give you the life you deserve. But I need you to know something, and I need you to never forget it. You are the strongest person I've ever known, stronger than any man I ever met. You got a fire in you that nothing and nobody can put out. Don't you ever bow your head to anyone, you hear me? Don't let this world make you feel small. You're not small, you're a giant. You're my warrior. Take care of our boy. Teach him to be strong like you. And when times get hard, and I know they will, remember that you got everything you need inside you already. I love you forever, Daniel." The tears came then, not the quiet tears she'd been crying for weeks. No, these were deep, soul-shaking sobs that came from a place she'd locked away for 3 long years. She pressed the letter to her chest and cried for the man she'd lost, for the life they could have had, for every humiliation she'd endured in silence. But something else came too, something powerful, something fierce. Her husband had called her a warrior, a warrior. Mary stood up, wiping her tears, and looked at herself in the small, cracked mirror on the wall. Her eyes were red, her face was worn, but underneath all that pain, she saw it. That fire Daniel had talked about, it was still there. It had always been there. "I'm a warrior," she whispered to herself, "and warriors don't bow." The next morning, when Mary walked to the Miller farm, there was something different about her. Her shoulders were a little straighter, her steps were a little firmer. The letter was tucked safely in her apron pocket, right next to her heart. The question burning in everyone's mind was this: what would this new Mary do when Evelyn tried to break her down again? It happened on a Saturday morning. Evelyn showed up at the farmhouse with boxes of wedding invitations, ready to finalize the guest list. She was going on and on about the flowers, the cake, the dress she'd ordered from the city. John sat at the kitchen table, listening to her talk, but his mind was somewhere else. He was thinking about Mary, how she'd returned that $20, how she prayed every morning before work, how she loved her boy with every fiber of her being, how she carried herself with dignity even when the world tried to crush her. And he was thinking about Evelyn, how she laughed when people were hurting, how she measured worth by dollar signs, how she treated Mary like trash. "John, are you even listening to me?" Evelyn snapped her fingers in front of his face. That's when something inside him broke. Or maybe it was something that finally came together. "Evelyn," he said quietly, "I can't marry you." The room went dead silent. Evelyn stared at him like he'd just spoken a foreign language. "What did you just say?" "I said I can't marry you." John stood up, his voice growing stronger. "I thought I knew what I wanted. A beautiful wife, someone from the city, someone who looked good on my arm. But I was wrong. So wrong. You're not making any sense." Evelyn's voice was rising, panic creeping in. "You're cruel, Evelyn. You're mean-spirited and heartless. You treated Mary, a woman who's been through more pain than you could ever imagine, like she was nothing. And I stood by and let it happen. That makes me just as bad as you." "That woman?" Evelyn's face twisted with rage. "You're breaking off our engagement because of that poor excuse for—" "Don't." John's voice cut like steel. "Don't you dare finish that sentence." Evelyn's eyes went wide. "You have feelings for her, for that housekeeper." "What I have," John said slowly, is respect for her, something you wouldn't understand. This is insane. Your mother put you up to this, didn't she? Or that old farmhand? Nobody put me up to nothing. I'm finally seeing things clear for the first time in months. John walked to the door and opened it. I think you should leave. You'll regret this. Evelyn grabbed her purse, her hands shaking with fury. So you're throwing away everything for what? For some poor widow? I'm choosing to be a better man, that's what. Evelyn stormed out, her heels clicking hard on the porch. At the door, she turned back one last time. You're a fool, John Miller. A complete fool. The door slammed behind her, rattling the windows. John stood there, his heart pounding. He'd done it. He'd finally done it. But now came the real question. Did he have the courage to stand by Mary openly? To show the whole town what he'd learned about true worth? Sunday morning, the whole town gathered at the community church for service. Mary sat in the back row, like always, with Tommy beside her, both dressed in their best, which wasn't much, but it was clean and pressed with care. Halfway through the service, John Miller stood up. The whole congregation turned to look. It wasn't common for someone to interrupt like that. Pastor, if I may, John said, his voice carrying through the small church. I got something I need to say. The pastor nodded, stepping aside. John walked to the front, then turned to face everyone. His eyes found Mary in the back row. She looked confused, maybe even scared. I owe this community an apology, John began. And more than that, I owe one person in particular the biggest apology of my life. Whispers rippled through the pews. Mary Thompson. John's voice was steady now, strong. Would you please stand up? Mary's face went pale. She shook her head slightly, but Margaret, who was sitting a few rows ahead, turned and nodded at her encouragingly. Slowly, Mary stood. For months, I let this woman be treated like she was worthless. I let people mock her, shame her, humiliate her. I stood by and did nothing while she worked harder than anyone I know, while she sacrificed everything for her son, while she showed more character and dignity than most of us could dream of having. The church was dead silent now. Mary's been eating scraps because she gives every bit of food to her boy. She's been walking 2 miles in the dark because she can't afford anything else. She's been enduring cruelty with grace because she's got a strength that comes from something deeper than pride. It comes from faith and love. Tears were streaming down Mary's face now. This woman, John continued, his own voice breaking, is not my housekeeper. She's not someone to be pitied or mocked. She's a warrior, and I was too blind to see it. John walked down the aisle until he stood in front of Mary. I'm sorry for everything, and from this day forward things are going to be different. You'll have a proper wage, a proper place to live, and the respect you've always deserved. Mary couldn't speak. She just nodded, tears falling freely. The congregation erupted. Some were crying, some were clapping, and others were shaking their heads in amazement. Margaret stood up, her old eyes shining. That's my son, she said proudly. Henry, the farmhand, called out, now that's doing what's right. And Mary, sweet, strong, dignified Mary, stood there in that small country church, no longer the humiliated housekeeper, but a woman whose worth had finally been recognized. Because here's the truth, y'all. Life might be hard. The world might try to break you. But dignity, honesty, and faith, they always win in the end. Always. This story shows us something powerful, that true worth isn't found in money, fancy clothes, or where you come from. It's found in how you treat people when nobody's watching. It's found in the quiet strength of a mother who sacrifices everything for her child. It's found in the courage to admit when you're wrong and make it right. Mary could have given up. She could have let the cruelty break her. But she didn't. She kept her dignity, kept her faith, and kept moving forward. And in the end, that dignity triumphed over every bit of arrogance thrown her way. Now let me ask you something. How many times have you let the world make you feel small? How many times have you bowed your head when you should have stood tall? How many times have you let someone treat you like you're worthless when you know deep down that you're a warrior? Maybe it's time to remember who you really are. Maybe it's time to stop accepting cruelty and start demanding the respect you deserve. Maybe it's time to look in the mirror and see what Mary finally saw. That fire inside that nothing and nobody can put out. Are you ready to make that change? Are you ready to stand up and be the warrior you were meant to be? If this story touched your heart, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss another story that could change your life. And hey, click on the video appearing on your screen right now. We've got more incredible stories of courage, redemption, and triumph waiting for you. Trust me, you don't want to miss what's coming next.